Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. For those newly joining the program, my name is Irina Zuckerman and I am the editor-in-chief of the Washington Outsider. Today, we'll be talking about the dark side of US cybersecurity. Not just about the Russian hackers or the Chinese cyber espionage operations, although some of it may come into play as well. But what is wrong with the US cybersecurity industry? Why are things going as wrong as they did? The toxicity behind the work that's supposed to keep us all safe, and of course, the law enforcement, the general incompetence, the malicious actors, all that fun stuff. We'll get in on it. With us today is a special guest, Michael Slowik, who is both a professional in the industry and a survivor of some of that toxicity. Now, one of the things that brings Michael and me together, just to give you a little bit of a disclaimer, an ethical note, is the fact that we have a common adversary, if you might, a common nemesis, and a social media account, a Twitter/X account called Cthulhu, named after a mythical creature, but having a very real impact on reputations, on cyber environment, and even on security. Now, Cthulhu came into my life over 2 years ago when I interviewed an academic, um, a PhD student in digital forensics named Jonathan Scott about a report he wrote exposing very questionable practices by a digital rights NGO called Citizen Lab in its reporting on the infamous Pegasus campaign. Sounds perfectly innocuous, boring, apolitical, highly technical, right? But Cthulhu and a whole mob of social media accounts, some of them famous in the cybersecurity world, others anonymous, essentially tried to discredit that interview in every way possible, got me banned from X permanently, from Twitter then X, and also proceeded to harass Jonathan Scott and me across different platforms. They even went after journalists who dared to quote us, especially on issues regarding to cyber or technology. Cthulhu was one of the leading voices, and for 2 years, efforts to uncover who was the person behind that account failed until just now. And it's in this context that we are turning to Michael, who revealed his name for the first time on LinkedIn account just before himself being banned from that platform as well. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's start from the beginning. For those in the audience who are not familiar with the cybersecurity industry, the world of hackers, the gray area between the white hackers, the ethical professionals supposed to be helping us with our security, and the black hatters, the infamous hackers we hear is scary stories about. Who are you? What do you do? How did you get into this area?
I've been in IT since 1997. The most recent position, I do low-level support because of these people ruining my career, but I finally ascended to be a security and compliance expert at Microsoft. So, and I don't care who knows at this point, I was a victim of domestic violence and I lost my job. So it brought me to just I went online just to enjoy myself and I noticed all the cyber crime. So I started documenting it. And I was going to write an expose of like, my God, there's a lot of anonymous people on X and a lot of child pornography. So from there, you'll appreciate this. I actually wrote a 7-page signed confession to the FBI so that should they want to prosecute me for something, they could. So not only signed and dated, it literally details all of my activities from 2021 to present. And to backtrack a tiny bit, I think I have 40 active certifications in everything from cyber, human behavior, like interviews and interrogation. I trained with Johnny Reed. They're world famous. They literally, the Central Park 5 movie on Netflix. They were front and center. They actually sued Netflix and they settled out of court. That's how big it was. So even Netflix, as powerful as it was, couldn't tangle with John Reed. The John Reed teaches every law enforcement around the country, worldwide. They're recognized worldwide. It's an interrogation technique, and when it's used properly, it's very good. But like anything else, it can be abused. And then moving on, I studied under Chris Hadnagy. He was a former mentor of mine. He wrote The Art of Human Hacking. It's kind of famous in his own right. Um, and then I don't know, just for the last 15 years, I've been working on human behavior, uh, even going as recent as 2021, 22. I applied at Aberdeen Proving Grounds for military intelligence. I wasn't qualified enough, but they liked what I submitted. It was a communication framework based off CIA communication techniques. And then as of late, I'm now teaching LLMs, or large language models, how to utilize those techniques to interpret text, to see if there's markers of deception, or basically what some people call sentiment analysis. This is statement analysis. So yeah, I'm nobody. Honestly, in reality, I am nobody. So, but for some reason, I'm a somebody to these people. There's something about me that bothers them, which I appreciate that a nobody like me can be drawing the attention of a guy that was in Forbes and Good Morning America, right?
So,
So,
so let's start with that. Let's start with your first encounter with these accounts. Let's describe who those people are, and let's talk about also Tuhu account and how such a obscure reference, clearly an anonymous account, gained so much credibility in various spheres. We now know who that person is, and we'll come to that, to how his identity was revealed, but but until recently it was for all intents and purposes an anonymous account. So where did you come across these people first, and what happened?
and I'll read you this too, because it's important. That's what's even funnier. Like this, and to give you a little context, like Reed is famous for getting signed confessions. So when you're talking about, you have somebody who's a potential criminal, right, or a suspect, getting them to write something in their own handwriting is gold. Like you take that to a court of law here in this country, you got a prosecution. It's very hard to say, I didn't write that, right? They literally will put you in a room by yourself, hand you a pen after, like, not prompting you, but they'll talk to you. They'll do the interview, soft, non-accusatory, a lot of questions. And then, great, I'm going to leave the room. Do you need a Coca-Cola? And then they hand you a paper and pen and say, sign this. And you write your own, in your own words, what's on there. So let me read this. I guarantee you'll appreciate it. It covers all of it. Like, and if it's not, let me know, but it covers everything, including Cthulhu, how it started. And to backtrack, I met Jonathan 2022, I think. I was actually going to look that up the other day, and I noticed some guy on Twitter getting picked on by hundreds of people. Literally, I was just like,
That
wow,
sounds
this guy
like
gets a
Jonathan.
lot of heat. Yep. And I'm like, good God, this guy. And he was handling his own. And I was like, wow, like, so what I sent him was, it's trademarked, but I sent him my communication framework. And I said, hey, I've been working on this now for over a decade, close to 15 years. I submitted it to the military. It's called Rickroll the Troll. It's an entire communication framework on how to piss off trolls. And I sent it to him. And he was like, why? I'm like, I just, call me a champion for the underdog. And he's like, I'm not the underdog. I'm like, nah, you're handling your own somehow, but this is just not right. And that is quite literally, I had no idea who he was. I didn't even know that he was involved with the whole Catlin Gate, and I didn't even know who Citizen Lab was, literally. I worked in a different sector of IT, that we don't deal with spyware and stuff like that. It's just, IT is so big that people don't realize that you could be doing a lot of jobs and never ever touch, X. Working in compliance, I was dealing with big Fortune 10 to Fortune 500 companies, getting them compliant, like GDPR and HIPAA and PII. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't touch that. So I had no clue who the guy was. I really didn't. But that's how I met Jonathan. He was just being picked on online. The minute I defended him, that's when all this started, literally. And there's record of it. There's literal record of the minute that I started defending him, that's when all the rumors started about I support spyware and oppressive regimes, and then over time, and I don't want to go too forward. They found out my family is very high ranking in Israel. So my cousin used to be the former defense minister. He was the first person to put a woman in a tank. So I'm proud of that. He was the head of the tank division, and then he's the current secretary of education. So like when I say my family is not, they're not nobodies over there, but that's where the rumor started of I'm Mossad, I'm IDF, and I'm like, my family, what they do in Israel is different. If you're going to pick on anything, my little brother worked for the Justice Department. He was in the DIA, and he was also in the DOJ recently. So I myself am a nobody, but just wanted to give you that little bit of a background on my family. I've stayed low key in the background, helping the FBI for several years. Like I've got documented, which I'll send you later, of me taking down a pedophile site that was distributing 9 terabits of CP, and I took down their Mega Drive. I took down their website. It's the one of the few things that I've actually somebody could hold me accountable for. And then I also leaked out 10,000 FSB assets. I actually tried to sell it to the FBI. That being said, let me read this to you, and I guarantee you'll like it. It's linear also. So this is today is August 10th, 2023. So it shows you how far back I sent this, and I was trying to communicate with the FBI. My name is Michael Slowik. As of writing this message, I am of sound mind and body, and nobody is coercing or asking me to write this statement, right? Very important to write this stuff. Going back to January of 2022, I started noticing heavy criminal activity on Twitter with anonymous factions. Their online groups usually end with the letters SEC, like GhostSec, RoughSec, SiegeSec, etc. And all of Cthulhu's friends, like Cthulhu Sec and Lamp Sec, and idiots. They're all idiots, and excuse my language. I started tracking these groups in hopes to submit the information to law enforcement, potentially get my name on the radar as a legitimate cybersecurity researcher. I just started a company validated by the Secretary of State, as well as had obtained a cage code and SAM ID. Jonathan has one as well. A cage code and SAM ID allows you to do business with the government, particularly the Department of Defense. Another thing they said is not true, but is 100% verifiable, is they can't verify it because they don't have an account, because they're as important as they are, they're nobodies. So, um, so as of 2022, August of 2022, after doing months of research into DocSpin, very famous site, I leaked out a part of their database. I realized they were extorting children, and yeah, it didn't sit right with me. And its members, somebody named John Smith, alias, who had been feeding me intelligence on what is called the council. The council was the higher ranking members of the site and group. Like, these are the guys that actually control DocSpin as a site. Thought that I was lying about doing gray white hat research, and he said he knew a Fed that he wanted to put me in contact with. I asked for the agent's number and reached out to him with my real name, company name, and DoD SAM ID to validate. The agent gave me a teleporter link. This is teleporter, like Matt Taibbi when they were making fun of him, the secret teleporter. That's how it's like Dropbox for feds, and it has the worst upload also, by the way. He gave me a teleporter link. I uploaded 800 photos of actual Taliban holding their actual identifications, as well as I gave him, you'll remember this hopefully, Zakon RU. Zakon, as you know, in Russian means law. It's almost funny. It was a play on words because these were the lawyers that were keeping tabs on the oligarchs. Do you remember the story of the Zakon lawyers mysteriously falling off parking garages and dying? I had their database, and I'll get to that. Um, the database contained the names and addresses and phone numbers of, it had 70 pages, pages in a database. I only got 10,000. That was literally just the first 10 pages. I don't even want to tell you how many names were in this database. I stayed up for 4 days scraping it because there was no other way to get it out of there. And so The credentials to the database, they were given to me by Doomsec, who actually had been a big claim to fame. Former members who then broke off and created a group called Cromsec. These were the guys that were claiming to take out Russia's NASA. I don't know if you remember this. Like
Yes.
it made the news. So, me, a nobody, is all of a sudden getting invites to join Doomsec, Cromsec, and all of these groups. So all verifiable too, but they would log in for me. They were unable to grab the data out of the database and asked if I would give it a shot. I spent 4 days scraping it manually. I just got tired and gave up. It had 77,000 pages total in the database, but I got the first to 10 pages, which had 10,000 names, locations, and personal informations on assets located all over the planet. At this time, the agent asked how I acquired the information. I told him. He was counterintelligence, by the way, for North Carolina Division. I'll withhold the name for right now, but I offered to sell them the list. They never got back to me. Not long after, Anonymous leaked some of the database online, but word is they had it for some time as well. I did, in fact, post those stolen credentials to the Karakurt chat as a joke, as I knew that the database had already been emptied out. So, because I had people accusing me of spreading login information and saying it was illegal, it was already leaked, and the
Mhm.
FBI was made aware of it. So, technically and legally, I did nothing wrong. I wanted to see who would click on it so I could use it to report them to law enforcement. When we spoke, myself and the agent, we spoke about a man named Hydra. Hydra was the head of a child extortion group, also known as 7997 and 764. I don't know if you're familiar with that group, like internationally wanted guy. He caused children to commit suicide. Um, they were an extortion group. They also made kids carve their name in his bodies while he filmed it and laughed. He was brought up because of his ties to Doxbin, and I had information on him. I had baited him to the point where he had given me an address to meet up with him. The agent and we exchanged a few more text messages. We never spoke again. Um, Also, part of what I gave them was what I called op pedo bear, which is people accusing me of live streaming porn. It was me going in and out of chat rooms and getting user IDs. No CP ever streamed. FBI fully aware of it. North Carolina Counterterrorism Division, if anybody ever wants to double check that. And I will be providing you with the encrypted communications with the PGP key to unlock it. Um, on or about December to January of 2022, 2023, I encountered an individual that goes by the name Pavel Krovchenko. You may have heard of this from Jonathan. This is one of the people that's been harassing Jonathan. Um, he's known as Dark Rabbit, amongst other names. We met in a Karakurt chat room, and I engaged him on the side and invited him to join a Gray Hat channel that I was the moderator of. Skyler, his real name, he told me he was an undercover criminal informant for both the FBI and law enforcement, as well as told me that he was personally responsible for getting members of extortion and ransomware groups locked up, like Lockbit. Skyler said it was a neighbor of his who was dumb enough to leave their laptop open. He reported them, and that's how he became on the FBI's radar. I asked Skyler why, and he said because he wanted to help the people that hurt kids that he loved. Some point, Pavel, whose real name is Skylar James Eggert of Auburn Hills, Michigan, decided that I was public enemy number one. Started screen capturing and taking things out of my channel. The last interaction we had was me telling Skylar that I had a cleaned up photo of the head of Lockbit, and I was able to make out his face. Fun fact, I have the actual face and it wasn't Lockbit. I have the actual face of the head of Conti ransomware group, the Conti, and I've offered it to the feds for the price of $16 million is what they publicly stated it was worth. If they don't want to come up with $16 million, they can get nothing. It sits in an encrypted drive moving around the planet. So just so you know. So a nobody, remember, I'm a nobody though. Um, my last interaction with him was saying I had this cleaned up photo. He demanded that I give it to him. And I told him to fuck off. We never spoke again. This ties into Cthulhu. Skylar got in his head I was a cyber criminal, solely based off messages posted in a Telegram channel. In fact, the only screenshot this guy ever got was me talking to Karakurt and me wishing Karakurt good night. Karakurt was a ransomware group. When you talk about the scale of their success, they're known but they're not at the top. But the thing is, people didn't pay attention to them. They strategically looked after their targets. They never hit the same target twice. They always kept their word and they followed, believe it or not, Bushido warrior code. See, that's what happens when you don't act like a jerk and you get to know them. Well, while they are criminals, they're people too. So they actually had an honor system about how they attack companies. If they attacked a company and said we want 5 million, they actually knew it wouldn't even affect payroll. So I thought that was very interesting for a cyber criminal organization to go, we know you have the money. They would look into people's personal assets. So it was funny that Kurt, you didn't never really hear it in major news, but you should have, because they attacked major companies. So I got them in a private talks chat, and I will be providing you that as well. So you'll be the first person to ever see the conversations with them. And as I promised you, Bastard Lord, I sent you the Russian version of that last night. I'll get to that too. Um, so Skylar alludes to me saying in a character chat that I have an exploit I'd like to discuss as sole proof that I'm a cyber criminal. Meanwhile, that's actually how I got the interview with them. I just said, hey, I got an exploit I wanted to talk to you about. And they said, what exploit? I said, I don't have one. I just wanted an interview. And they said, cool. Um, so he points out a demo that I posted in a top LinkedIn chat that I was a cyber criminal teaching other people how to use Lockbit. Meanwhile, you'll remember this. It was only months later that people realized this was leaked. I don't know if you remember, Lockbit forgot to pay one of their developers, so he decided to leak the builder online. So I was demoing how you can use Windows to actually break apart ransomware without having to spend a whole bunch of tools. Again, I'm a nobody though. So I shot the demo for one of the largest security groups, invite only, on LinkedIn, and to date at that time it had over 5,000 views because people were impressed it was just Windows that I was using. At no point was that channel owned by me. It only contained leaked data that had already been reported and leaked, which is legal. This guy Pavel kept sneaking into my room, stealing it, and then eventually trying to take credit for it. I closed the channel down. This guy decided if he couldn't be in the channel, he was just going to disrupt it. People were upset. This was also the overflow from VX Underground, a very well-known malware collection group, right? Like anybody that was like kicked out of VX Underground ended up in my chat. So if you can't tell, I was intel gathering. This was like some of the top cyber criminals were in my group just chatting, and I was just collecting the data until this idiot came along. And this is going to play into Cthulhu also. Um, Oddly, Skylar keeps calling the data from the channel illegally obtained, stolen, etc., but then he took it and put it in a GitHub and then said, I'm an idiot. Meanwhile, he had possession of all the data from the channel. I don't have it. This guy has it. At this time, I didn't even know who this guy was. I only knew that what he told me. He said he was some type of human intelligence or an informant, and he was passing this off to law enforcement. It wasn't until later I realized that nothing the guy said was true. He was actually a member of Docspin community. He was extorting and harassing minors. He had a long history of harassment, taking people's information and then using Docspin as a repository so he could keep going back and harassing people. He was also doing this on LinkedIn and Twitter. He's known to hang around with the low fruits groups, and anybody that tries to expose who he was, he would dox you and then threaten to expose you. And then I later found out he turned you into the FBI. Once he had an issue with you, he calls you a pedophile. Jonathan, by the way, I'm mentioning this because this is the same guy Jonathan has issues with. So it was another thing that brought me to Jonathan was this kid, Dark Rabbit. So then he goes on social media and starts harassing you. So this guy's actually been harassing Jonathan, I found out, by the way, since 2021. So it wasn't until I started meeting Jonathan that I'm like, do you know this guy? He's like, yeah, this guy's been harassing me for years. And I'm like, cool. Turns out he's an FBI informant. It wasn't until other people started pointing out that Skylar, that I started getting a full picture of who he was, what he did, and what he was, and the things that he was involved in, which was blackmail, extortion, and harassment. I asked the kid to stop repeating, tweeting about me, defaming me on Discord, Telegram, Twitter, Facebook, and everywhere else on the planet. He didn't care. So moving forward from that, and again, I promise, if you can't tell, it's all linear and it ties in. I met somebody who was being targeted by Anonymous. Me being the defender of the week, I stepped up. According to Anonymous, she faked her own death and was doxing members of Anonymous. Skylar reaches out to her, gets the only photo I had ever leaked was to her. He reaches out to her. He says, I'm a cyber criminal. She gives him my photo. Skylar decided publicly he was going to leak it along with all my PII. None of the information had ever been on the internet at that point. Nobody had ever seen me, my face. They didn't know my name, like, for a reason. Um, I had to get rid of that phone number actually, which is how law enforcement and the FBI used to get a hold of me due to nonstop calls. Since changing that number, I don't get any calls. Starting in May of 2023, I started using Twitter Spaces. You can see where this is going. I was asked by a group of mothers to do a social engineering demo utilizing the read technique. Read, the interviewing technique, is all about acting things out. You pretend, an act so that you empathize with the person you're trying to get information from. Um, so I performed a mock situation of an online predator would antagonize a parent to get to their kid and vice versa. A Twitter account holder by the name of Cthulhu Answers decided to use an incognito browser session. So this is when Elon decided he was going to let people record spaces without, remember this, without being signed in. Yeah, he then got rid of it and then brought it back. So thus he wasn't even a party to the group. So he then distributed 16 seconds of that audio. He tagged the National Center for Exploiting Missing Children and the FBI, saying that I was a pedophile and I was extorting children in a Twitter space with all adults, no kids. Over 30,000 people at that time had seen the chopped up audio and then reshared it out. To date, it's been shared out over 1 million times, commented on, and then that caused Anonymous to come after me. So now Anonymous, who's already turned members of them in, is now coming and threatening my life. Multiple bounties were placed on my life as well. I'm only laughing because it wasn't a lot. It was like $70 US, but it was like 5,000 or 9,000 in Russian rubles, and so it's not a lot of money to have your life threatened. The same Twitter user had been harassing, stalking, and was named in an audio clip. A friend of mine, Jonathan Scott. Jonathan's wife got death threats and was harassed by this Twitter account, Cthulhu Answers. Also, Eric Brogdon, who went by the name Russian Hackers Cry. You may remember that account also,
Mm-hmm.
Russian Hacks Cry. And
Another
then
old
another,
friend.
you remember that account? Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was the guy that was sexually harassing Jonathan's wife and then saying she liked it. So they're accusing me of like internet rape somehow, but this guy was publicly bragging that Jonathan's wife liked his advances. And we know we got everything on Eric Brogdon. Like he kind of disappeared for a little bit, but we know everything about him. And then another guy called InfoSec Skid Alliance and Associates. Skid Alliance account admitted to being part of extorting Jonathan out of $500 on Discord. Totally got this in writing. And this is only when Jonathan was desperately trying to get information on death threats against his family. Eric Brogdon admitting to harassing Jonathan's wife. We are now looking into Eric for running a potential scam on Ukraine. He did. He scammed Ukraine and being involved with a highly suspect person named April Dawn Huggett McDonald. Her alleged nonprofit is called Planet of People. Cthulhu account and his friends had released PII banking information. They harassed and even sent a photo of Jonathan while he was walking in DC testifying on a federal court case as an expert witness. This Twitter user thought it'd be funny to take a photo of Jonathan while he was walking with his attorney, Tor Eklund, and the court case was on lunch. And then he tweeted the photo online. You remember this also, right? Like this
Mm-hmm.
was a big deal. This brings us back full circle to Skylar James Eggert, also known as Pavel Kravchenko. He runs Dark Rabbit 47, Dark Rabbit, Legion, and Evil Rabbit Sec accounts. He interchangeably will say he's Pavel, and then when it's convenient, he says he's Mr. Eggert. But as provided in separate documents, in mid-July, he bid farewell to Twitter in a Medium article and stated Mr. Skylar James Eggert, I had a police report attached to this, is now running the account. So he forgot that, yeah. So when I asked this guy to stop mentioning me, he doubled down. He kept saying he's working with law enforcement, feds, Swiss police. I'm a criminal. My activities give him full authority. And he started communicating with Cthulhu at that point. So he started reaching out to all these other people that were harassing Jonathan. Be like, I know who this guy is. And then he gave my information to Ken, Cthulhu, aka Ken. He is, in fact, he says once he deems somebody a criminal, a pedo, or otherwise, he's allowed to do whatever he wants. He actually runs a channel called the Pedophile Torture Chamber, where he's been harassing a guy for 4 years who the feds already investigated and let go. I was forced to file a police report, one in my state, one in Michigan. I was forced to contact the FBI since this falls under their purview. After telling Skylar I filed a report, he then took my name, number, post in my location and posted it on Twitter. And Skylar said he was going to not only continue to harass, defame, and dox, but he was going to double his efforts because he was convinced I was lying about having a DoD government contract ID, owning a company, and that I was READ certified. Uh, he was convinced an audio that was only 16 seconds was the full duration. He took to Discord, Telegram, Facebook. He says I rape kids, coerce children, I'm a pedophile, and more. Even after new audio was released, which consisted of 38-second clip, 22-minute clip, and another 21-minute clip, which brings the total to 4 clips. I have an article in draft mode. I'll let you see if you want to help me contribute to it. And it exposes Cthulhu saying, for months, he's like, this 16 seconds is the only audio. 3 months later, he caved to pressure. Oh, no, there's 21 minutes. Now there's another 22 minutes. Well, I got this other one that's 38 seconds, making none of it admissible in court. But they're still actively campaigning that is evidence that I'm a pedophile. He refuses to believe that I've got both of these guys, that I've got certification in read technique, social engineering. They have refused to believe that I've submitted things to law enforcement, including the Knoxville Sheriff's Office. What's more concerning is this fascination with my Jewish heritage, and they consistently keep bringing up my Jewish faith. They keep bringing up my location, and oddly, I don't know what's disturbing. I shouldn't be laughing. They keep on sharing photos of my cats. I know that like you can laugh, it's kind of funny, but for some reason they're fascinated with my cats. And like he has a collection of my cats on his phone. And so, yeah. At one point, he even tried to say that there was only Jonathan and myself in this space and that we're both pedophiles. Like just me and Jonathan talking about children. Meanwhile, there was many people there, and it went on for hours. The audio proves otherwise. All evidence has been archived via the web archive, as well as multiple other archives. There's also forensic approved software that I have screen recorded that I never gave to the FBI. All the evidence has been archived. They've also been mirrored to several cloud drives. I attest all this is true. It's been reported to Tennessee Detective Lynham, Michigan Auburn Hills. I'm actually going to do this because why not? Oakland County Sheriff, Michigan, Lieutenant Hasselbeck, the Tennessee Office of the Federal Bureau of Investigations, Agent Clay Anderson, and the Charlotte Federal Bureau of Investigations, Agent Max Wooten, Counterterrorism Division. Signed by me. So I hope that actually that gave you a full circle of everything, didn't it?
Well,
Hopefully.
certainly brought us to up to speed of these self-proclaimed would-be vigilantes. The only thing is, if this is what they claim to be going after, if they were claiming to be, if they were spending all this time harassing fake pedophiles of their own invention, what the heck were they actually not doing? They were not doing their jobs.
I was getting to that. That's what's even funnier is that while all this is going on, and I had credible intel. So one of the things I met with the FBI, I met with them sometime last year, and I met with them at a coffee shop here in Knoxville. I met Agent Clay Anderson, and he brought his analyst, which I thought was interesting. So one's a field agent, like this is the guy that kicks in doors and arrests people, but he actually brought an intelligence analyst. And for anybody that doesn't know, like they're a big deal. Those are the people that usually don't leave the office. They're the ones that are looking at that's the job they offered me. So they put the strings together to make the arrests, but usually they don't leave the office. Somebody hacked the FBI. And I'm not laughing because it's funny, but it was 4 kids from India. And somehow they talked their university into thinking the project they were working on was a white hat project. It wasn't. It was a black hat project. And it was called Dark Army. Dark Army got very, very well known. They were upset that the FBI took down their Telegram channel. These are kids like children. Okay. So young that they were in the gym trying to work out and there was no weight. So they're just like the machine had no weights and they still couldn't do that. Like I thought that was funny that these kids hacked the FBI. So in retaliation, they stole internal forensic software called CART, CART. They leaked the entire InfraGard email scheme, the FBI, and their entire IP scheme. So when you say like, what are these IT professionals doing? You tell me. I'm here talking to Kara Kurt, getting actual intelligence. I'm interviewing Baster Lord, who hacked the Air Force in front of me in an interview, sending me real live ransomware negotiations and asking me for my advice, which I could not give him. And then you got John DiMaggio, right? John DiMaggio, a famous security researcher, saying that he doxed himself for the interview of a lifetime. I sent it to you in Russian, the original. I have to translate it back, but I believe that's the section where he says, I was upset. I'm like, why are you giving this guy the time of day? And he said, everything he gave him was a lie. So everything that was in, you saw the text message that I sent you with the Russian. That was the context of that, and I'll give you the full. I've never released that to anybody, but that is Bastard Lord, the full interview where he says nothing he told that guy was accurate, and he does it to play them. So they think, like you heard on the news, they got Bastard Lord. They never got him. He's still on the run because what they don't know is Putin got him out of Ukraine. He's in Russia. He's a Ukrainian citizen now living in Russia. And he says it. He's telling me his bank account. He thought I hacked him. The guy, like, he's actually so stressed out that he's on I think like Xanax or some type of not downer, but something to keep him chill. But he was telling me a story of the FSB coming into a friend's house, another ransomware operator, and putting a gun to the back of their head just to prove that they could do it. So Bastard Lord, like all these guys, what they don't understand is everything that they're doing at DEF CON, everything they're doing at Black Hat, it's not going to help shit because the problem is the problem is them. While they're on Twitter and they're at DEF CON and they're showing off all their CVEs and all these cool hacks, nobody's in there actually getting the intelligence that's needed for. So for example, sorry, I'm rambling a tiny bit. I'm tired. The cart software, 1 year prior to these kids hacking the FBI, I have text message, which I'm going to provide you. I was warning the FBI about Dark Army. So think about this. 1 year to the day from me saying, hey, Agent Wooten, have you checked out Dark Army? He ghosted me. 1 year later, I'm meeting with the FBI in Knoxville, and they're accusing me of stealing the software. And I'm like, you see this? This is me warning you 1 year ago of this. So you ask, what's being done? I'm just as equally as confused as you. When breached forums went down, I interviewed Palm 4 days before his arrest because like I said, I was so deep in the underground that they knew that I was reporting on them. They liked me though. That's the difference, but they don't have credible intel. I don't want to say that they're making up the intel, but what are they providing? When you have this guy like Dark Rabbit, Skyler, he thinks Jonathan's enemy number one. Cthulhu, Ken Weston, Jonathan's enemy number one. Well, then who's the enemy? If Jonathan's the enemy, everybody knows who he is. The FBI knows where he lives. The police know where he lives. Why is Jonathan not in jail? Why am I not in jail? Why are we being hacked left and right? And the largest leak in US history just hit the internet? Because all of these security researchers are doing this. They're spending all of their time getting people banned from security conventions and labeling people pedophiles and selling books. So it's pure opinion, but you obviously, when I saw the title of your thing, it's a podcast I had started 2 years ago called The Dirty Truth About Cyber. These people don't give a shit about getting the stuff fixed. They care about selling books and going to DEF CON every single year and trading stickers and they control who gets in the industry. So the bigger picture, they control who gets in. If they don't like you, they block your career, which you know about this already. So that's the problem with cyber, in my opinion. And I've been doing this since what, 97? And I've worked for companies as large as Microsoft and some very massive Sophos, WatchGuard, net, you name it, I've touched the device. I've got the certifications to show it also. So you tell me why somebody like, I don't want in their sandbox, but why aren't they looking for people like me? It's because and Jonathan, because we don't want to associate with people like that. That's why. It's the only answer I can give you to that question, but they're too busy on Twitter getting people's accounts banned,
all of
right?
this all of this is just simply unbelievable, but I do think it's important to come out because in the past several months, in the past 6 months, I think we've probably had more major hacks and leaks announced than in the prior 10, 15 years that I've been tracking. That's just me with just just based on the news that I know about and not things that haven't been announced. But that's my impression. And we are talking about major companies. We're not just talking about things no one's ever heard of and
Correct.
random ransomware robberies of,
Right. Not just like the ones that like, oh, everybody knows ransomware is a big deal. To give you a bit even bigger picture, like, and you'll see this. I have this. I'm giving you everything. When I was talking to the FBI, the kid breached forums, right? Huge, right? Breached forums took place of rapid forums, right? Raid forums that was before it. Palm in 1 year became the largest database of stolen data that the world's ever seen. 1 year. We talked about it during my interview. I asked him why he was doing it. He said he wanted to leave a legacy behind. He wanted to be able to facilitate the selling of stolen data without having being robbed. Like the equivalent of a drug dealer being like, yeah, okay, drugs are bad, but I just want to make sure that you can get it without getting killed in the process. And I'm like, number one, he achieved his dream. He was also released, so they didn't even keep him in jail. But it was somebody on his site that you'll remember, Intel Broker, the guy that went by the name Intel Broker. He was the kid that hacked um, the government healthcare portal. The reason why breached forums was taken down was that hack right there. All the other stuff before that they didn't care about. When they healthcare portal got hacked, I even turned to the FBI, Clay, and I said, "Who who turned to your boss and literally said I need an arrest like yesterday? From the time that they hacked that portal till Palm's arrest was 3 months. So you tell me if the feds don't know about some of this stuff. 3 months. You tell me any other thing that like this is from Palm's arrest to conviction. 3 months. 3 months. You can look at the timeline of it. And why this is relevant is at that time, while I was communicating with the FBI, I had a source that was willing to give me the identity of Intel Broker. When the FBI screwed me and decided to take this dark rabbit and Cthulhu seriously, my source said to me, why should I trust you when you can't even trust the FBI? So when you ask, yes, also, that's the same kid that hacked Comcast, Colonial Pipeline, and numerous other companies. He hacked Colonial Pipeline. Like anybody on the internet can go and Google search and see Intel Broker, and you can see the things that he did. He's known as cPanel God. He also claims to have a copy of Pegasus. So if Ken is so big and has so many connections, why is Ken not helping? Ken is the one that's like, oh, Jonathan sells malware. Well, I had the guy that claims to actually, that was the one message that got the FBI's attention very quickly. After they started ghosting me and I didn't realize they were having me helping to try and prosecute myself, what they didn't realize was I had that. I had the identity of GhostSec. I had the identity of Intel Broker. All of those sources pulled away. So when you say, yeah, the size, nobody's going to doubt that Colonial Pipeline, the only company ever fined by CISA, was a big company. And just a couple months ago, the logs were being sold again. So I don't know if you had known that, but this we're talking what 5, 6 years later. Intel Broker had persistence in the system. He still had access to their system after months, and Intel Broker's a kid. He's in his 20s, lives in Russia. So to answer your question about why nothing gets done, that was my pitch to the DoD is green light me to go in there in the gray, operate in the gray. Obviously, I don't want to be law enforcement, but you can't get into the areas that people need to get in. People like Cthulhu or Ken and all these other guys, you think that Lockbit's going to entertain a conversation with Ken Weston? Have you seen the guy? He's a drug addict alcoholic who carries a dildo to security conferences. Nobody takes him seriously. Jonathan says it all the time. Like, yeah, he may be in a Good Morning America, Forbes, Wired magazine, but who is he? He's a guy that's so sad he's on Twitter harassing Jonathan and going around and getting LinkedIn accounts suspended. But like you said, what's he doing for cybersecurity outside of beefing his own career?
So that brings us to the identity of Ken Weston. Let's, before we get to the point of how he ended up being finally revealed after all this time, how did he get involved in this? Sounds like he's had pretty good jobs. Somehow managed to get it on the news. What's his deal? How did he end up in this place in life?
I will tell you exactly as I know it. So after all this stuff got leaked, my name got leaked, my parents, the cyber criminals who I even cut ties with, they still communicate with me. I told them stop sending me. I don't want anything. So somebody messaged me beginning of August, and the reason why this guy was messaging me, he got doxxed as me. So he didn't get doxxed. They fail doxed him. I'm everybody, by the way. I'm you. I'm Jonathan. I'm Ken. I'm everybody. I'm everybody on Earth. Anybody that you think I am, I'm them. I'm an international arms smuggler. If anybody needs a deal on Tech Nines, you just let me know, right? I got tanks, everything, planes. So somebody reached out to me and said, "Have you seen this?" And it was a photo. And I sent it to Jonathan. And he said, "Where did you get that photo?" I'm going to pull this up so I can actually even quote it exactly. So Jonathan goes in, "Thank you for texting me." I was like, "Jonathan, tell her that my account got suspended." So I sent him the photo and Jonathan goes, "Who is that?" I go, "That's Cthulhu." And he said, "No," right? Because everybody wanted to know who Cthulhu was. And I said, "That's Cthulhu." And he said, "How do you know?" I said, "Because one of my sources has been following him and they've been harassing this guy, calling him me." So everybody that's communicating with me now, they've all been accused of being me. Meanwhile, I work for an education firm. I'm not going to say who, because I'm also a mandatory court reporter, meaning that legally, if I suspect child abuse, that's the irony here. I have to report it. So apparently, I'm a child abuser who reports child abuse with no criminal record, DOD contracts, and everything else. But I sent him the thing, and he goes, "That's Ken Weston," and I go, "Well, who's Ken Weston?" And he said, "A piece of shit." I'm like, "This is Cthulhu," and he said, "How do you know?" And I said, "Because he texted a tweet that actually said, 'I'm doxing myself.'" So he actually released his own photo and then took it down. But he didn't realize that he had this many people watching him. See, what Ken doesn't know is Ken has pissed off so many people, everybody's watching Ken. The people that matter, all the cyber criminals, all of them. So they're all watching Ken. And he said, he said, I'm trying to get you the photo real quick on here, and I'll put it up. But he said, here it is. This is from Ken as Cthulhu. So he says, "Some folks take this account too seriously. I doxed myself because the weird rumors of me being a Fed, a nation state actor, and other rumors are stupid and getting weird. Some also seem to think I'm supposed to be something I'm not, or I owe them something. I don't. Namaste, bitches." Which is just, you've been dealing with Cthulhu yourself for years. So yeah, it's on par for how he talks. And then he kept on. What Ken doesn't know is the famous guy that took down Mafia. I have a bot set up that was taking all of his tweets and exporting them out to a channel I'm not going to name right now. It could be Discord, it could be Telegram. I'm not going to say. So I've been collecting evidence on Ken. I automated it. I just didn't have the time in my life to follow all the things Ken said. In July alone, he tweeted about me 72 times, thinking that I'm Jonathan. So Ken thinks I'm Jonathan. That's the reason why. Yeah, no, that's the funniest thing. So Ken still to this day thinks that I'm Jonathan. So that's how I found out who Ken was. He doxed himself. And then he didn't take the photo down quick enough. And somebody got it at like, I think it was over the weekend. It was like August 1st, August 2nd, somewhere between the 1st and the 12th. He put a photo up. Then he said he was high as shit. Then he took it down. Don't do drugs, kids. And then, yeah, then he accompanied it with a tweet. And in that tweet, it went to my bot and it said, "I doxed myself." And it was one of my contacts. It said, "These match up. The date and the time match up to when he posted it." That's how we found out who Ken was, because I verified it with Jonathan. So he posted a photo. I sent it to Jonathan. Jonathan goes, "That's Ken Weston. He's a piece of shit."
So
That is
clearly,
exactly.
clearly, Ken is someone with an extremely impaired judgment. How did he manage to stay on his jobs, much less, appear on all these TV shows when he posts random things about himself in a state of, of being high. How can someone like that be trusted with cybersecurity? If you're inebriated or if you're on drugs, you can blurt out anything to anybody. You can endanger company secrets, government secrets, whatever you want. You won't know what you're doing.
I listen, I agree with you. I mean, listen, I smoked weed when I was at Microsoft, but I never made bad decisions. That's one of the most solid questions. Like all this guy does is post photos of him doing drugs. I don't want to say drugs, it's weed, but it is still legally a drug in the US, and alcohol. It's all he's posting. It's all he posts is drugs, alcohol, and Jonathan and Michael. That's it. That's everything this guy posts about. So that's a good question. I mean, what's funny is I'm reading this. Jonathan said, so this was August 13th. Ken deleted the post with the picture, the Ken Weston picture. And I said, interesting. They're all blocked me, but it's him. He's from Oregon. Jonathan says, well, he lives in Iceland now. So I'm like, Jonathan had some old intel on him. So, and Jonathan, I'm sure, hopefully, like it was an obsession for him, like it was for me to find out who this guy was. He said Ken Weston blocked me on LinkedIn as well. He works for Panther Labs, so you could reach out to them and complain if you want. I said, I doubt they'll listen, but it all makes sense now. It's worth pursuing it. Then Jonathan sends me all kinds of things about him. He says in this podcast from this year that he exposed nation state actors on his free time. So that's the question is Ken working when he's doing all this stuff? We don't know what Ken actually does because he worked for Panther. Panther pays Ken to go around the country. So we don't know what he actually does. He's supposed to be like a spokesperson and a highly intelligent person. All we see is him, excuse my language, shitpost and post pictures of weed. So to your point, I don't know. But here's the funny thing. Jonathan says he says in this podcast he was speaking at Cactus Con. Then he sent an old tweet. He says, look at the media he posts on Twitter. Floors look like the same as what Cthulhu posted. So we've been literally, we've got stockpiles of photos and things, years of tweets, literally immutable. Like we could take these to court. Um, I said, I pitched them to you a while ago. You just didn't make the connection because, Jonathan. So I don't know if I want to admit this, but somebody reached out to Ken on LinkedIn. Ken thinks it's me. So Jonathan said, hey, you got a new job. And he said, no, I haven't seen the new tool. And then Jonathan sent this photo of Ken. And
This does not look like somebody who should be a spokesman for anybody other than a pot company.
yeah, no, he's holding alcohol too on top of it. And the best part is you can tell he's insane from the photo. I say, yeah, that's him. And then I sent him some stuff. So somebody messaged Ken. I got the evidence here. I'll share it with you. But somebody messages Ken on LinkedIn. He says the person was named Disinformation Network. Just an admirer. I work in the field of fighting disinformation, and I've been following you for a long time. I admire your work, and in my honest opinion, you should not have posted your picture on the Cthulhu account. A few of my colleagues were disappointed to see it was you. So this was bait. I'm glad you deleted it, but distance yourself from that account. A lot of us look up to you, and seeing you running the account is not a good look. Take care. So I said all the dates match to when Cthulhu and Ken were at their engagement. So anytime Cthulhu said, I'm going to this account, Ken was there. That's how we also put it together. They all match up the posts.
So this is what I didn't get. Wouldn't a cybersecurity professional not post where they are going and that sort of identifying information?
Because that's the thing is like Ken is paid to travel around the country and the world promoting the company that he works for. If you want my honest opinion, Ken is like what they call an evangelist for a company.
So he's
So
a PR guy. He's not actually somebody with technical skills. Is that the right way of putting it?
he claims to. That's the thing. Like, we've never seen anything technical come out of him, but he claims that he does. I'm
So
never
how?
going to like, I'll never say, like, notice how I'm not, it's not that I'm scared of him.
Mm-hmm,
I've never seen him post anything technical ever once, ever.
mm-hmm.
Like, there's videos of me using Lockbit and being accused of using Lockbit. It means I know how to use ransomware. I'm showing people like, hey, this is how you use this tool. We've never seen anything from Ken,
So
not
how
once.
so how did he end up in all this media and associated with these alleged takedowns of hackers and criminal gangs and so forth? What was his alleged role in the past before this spokes organization?
So I looked into him. Ken apparently made a tool. So he had a company called Tripwire. Ken made a tool where allegedly he exploited the tool and somebody stole his friend's laptop, is the story, I think. And then Ken used tracking and turned on the tracking and found the laptop. Now Ken is a hero. Yeah,
What? Are you serious?
swear to God, the story's online. It's been reported by Good Morning America. That's what I mean. Like, this is like that guy Dark Rabbit, who claims that he's some cyber professional, and it turns out he's a pedophile and an FBI informant. And the only reason why, by the way, the reason why I keep mentioning him, Ken made him relevant. A 23-year-old former bag boy from Michigan, Ken, as Cthulhu, said this guy's credible. Then this guy's starting to get interviews with magazines. Meanwhile, he's a 23-year-old liar who spent 10 months in a psych ward in a straitjacket. And that's what I mean. Like, when you say, what did Ken do? I don't see a GitHub. I don't see anything other than he had a company and he calls himself a professional cyber stalker. If you Google Ken Weston, you will see he calls himself a professional cyber stalker. Everybody knows that Ken is a stalker. It's Good Morning America said, we have a professional cyber stalker on our show.
So, in other words, he made his Twitter activities a professional activity and calls it, I guess, basically trolling. He made it sound good.
Yep. And I'll tell you something. So that response, when the person who messaged Ken, not me, so this is a tweet from somebody else or a LinkedIn message. I'm not going to expose who this person is. I'll tell you privately though. But when Ken keeps saying it was me, when all this goes to court, which it will, Ken's not going to be able to be like, well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I accused you of being Jonathan and 1,000 different accounts. Like, Ken, I have 3 attempted swats, 4 now, messages on my family's answering machine, and everybody's saying that I'm a pedophile. Kent is the worst behind it. I actually, let me read, hang on. So this is Kent's reply. Sorry to disappoint, but you also don't realize what I've been through. So if Ken is not Cthulhu, right? This person reaches out to Ken and says, hey, you need to separate yourself out from Cthulhu. Ken's response, this is from Ken Weston. Ken Weston, he replies back. Whoops. Hang on. Ken's actual reply with his photo here too. Sorry to disappoint, but you don't know what I've been through. And I'm like, wow, this motherfucker. And Jonathan got this message. So I'm talking to Jonathan here. Jonathan has this evidence. Said he's been actually helping Skylar, an actual criminal. Jonathan says he's clearly mentally unstable, and I think he's still in the US. Jonathan says, now I have confirmation that this is him. So, um, yeah, I don't know. Yes, you're right. He's turned cyber stalking on Twitter into a professional career. And I just got back the FOIA request today. So somebody tried to get me swatted a couple days ago. And this is exactly, I'm not going to read this person's name. I got this guy's name, me. So he got my name and location from online posts to social media from Kent. I am stalking and harassing people online. They're worried about my mental health and that I'm going to be killing myself. Yeah, from
Unbelievable.
Ken. It's from Ken posting my photo, a mugshot, that he cropped the photo. Underneath it, it says charges unknown. So the case was sealed, expunged, and dismissed. I forgot to get the photo taken off the internet. So that's what Ken does. Ken's been exploiting the fact that people don't read. And he's been sharing that photo and saying I'm a pedophile. And that's what I have here too. And I'll give you these reports. So, because I get them for free. But yeah, 2 cops showed up at my house the other day for that. And then there's another one. Here's an, here's another one. Same wording. I've been making threats since January that I'm going to rape children. Um, Multiple reports of inappropriate videos and stalking and harassing children. Uh, I'm extremely unstable. I'm an ex felon. I'm in possession of a gun, and I'm making threats to people on the internet. It's almost word for word, these reports. And they got it all from Ken. Ken Weston, Cthulhu Answers, sharing my information. He deleted his account, by the way. He changed his name. So Cthulhu Answers is gone now. Now he's Ken Weston.
So, so our dear friend Ken, here's a question. First of all, how and why did he decide that Skylar is credible, whereas you are not? Why did he decide to believe that individual? Why did the law enforcement believe them? Why did they take these people seriously?
I can actually answer that. So the process when you contact the feds is everything you give them has to be vetted, which makes sense. But the first thing you give them is a freebie. It's like drugs. The feds are drug dealers. So the first one's always free as a joke. Listen, it's no secret too. I had a drug empire at 17 years old. Never got arrested. Not like they think I'm embarrassed by all this. I'm like not embarrassed by I was 17 and had employees. But the way it works is first one's always free. I'm going to give you this on the house. Once they vet you, they take your information seriously. So when this guy Skylar says, "Hey, this guy's a cyber criminal," I've got this other guy, Ken, and we're going to find that out later in court too. Is how long did Ken know or Skylar know that Ken was Ken? Right? Did Ken tell him, "Hey, I'm a big deal," you know? So and Skylar say, "Hey, I work with the feds." You heard the audio, by the way. I want to get your opinion on that audio, but that was a federal agent. So that's what I mean. Like to if for your audience, the audio that I sent you is 45 minutes of a federal informant wiretapping the FBI. You cannot record the FBI. You can't. It's illegal. It's literally against the law. But in there, in the first 5 minutes, they're talking about me being in possession of a gun that I'm not supposed to have. So to answer your question, why did they believe him? Because he was a vetted informant, meaning
Mm,
that it's assumed from that point everything he gives is credible.
so they don't corroborate pieces of evidence the way, for instance, if you are in intelligence, you're supposed to corroborate the piece of intelligence and so forth. If you're a journalist, you're supposed to have two or three sources.
Think about it. What's the one thing the FBI does? Background checks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if they would have just performed a background check, they would have found that in the same month that I bought the gun, which I bought because I'm being stalked and harassed by a federal informant, I also got a TSA pre-check. You know what that is, right? To be able to skip the line at the airport. So in 1 month, I had Homeland Security clear me for a gun. I had Homeland Security and the FBI clear me for being able to get on an airplane with liquids and materials that are normally considered bomb making materials. But for some reason, they did not background check me at all. They took this kid's word. So Skylar took edited. So he took my he filed for my arrest record. And when I was 17 years old, I got arrested for theft. I cut a deal with the prosecution and they let me go. I had to do 5-year probation. I had to write letters of apology. I had to pay back the money that was stolen. Like I did my restitution to society. Skylar wasn't even born yet, but he swears to the FBI that they missed something. So a case that is 27 years old, he wants them to reopen it and he wants me to be reprosecuted. And he said, "Hey, he's in possession of a gun he's not supposed to have." He says I'm a felon. And that's why I said like it all fell apart. So after that audio was leaked out, by the way, they cut him loose. They're no longer working with Skylar. But they shut, and I have proof of this, they shut down every investigation into him also.
But why?
Right now,
Out of embarrassment or?
the only thing that even Jonathan and I can figure is yes, because think about this. Skylar reported me for a gun that I legally purchased, legally owned. The FBI turned, and you've heard it. They contacted the ATF and said, "Hey, you gotta run a background on this guy." It's like none of this makes sense. Like, why would the FBI contact the ATF and say run a background on this guy? You're the FBI. You're literally in communication with me. They asked me for everything I had on this guy Skylar, and then all of a sudden all his accounts got deleted. So I'll say on your recorded show what the FBI doesn't realize that was handed off to WikiLeaks and is sitting floating in a drive that I don't even have access to. I have to access somebody else to get access to the drive is actual evidence of all the stuff that I'm saying as well. Everything. I've got the my sheriff on record saying that the FBI called them and said there's nothing to investigate with this guy Skyler. This is on a recording that I have. I asked them about it. I said, "Why is the FBI telling you, the local police, what you're allowed to investigate? That's not how it works." And then I called the sheriff. I said, "The FBI is not allowed to shut down local investigations." And they said, "Where's your source?" I'm like, I said, "I'll give you the website." And he's like, "All right, go ahead." I'm like, "It's called FBI.gov. There's a questions and answers, right? You got to make them look stupid, which is what they don't like, and that's fine. But it says right there, is the local authority subservient to the FBI? First word, no, with a period after it, declaratory sentence, no, period. If local law enforcement requests help from the FBI, they're allowed to come in and assist with resources. What the FBI did was say, and this is on audio recording, on my work line, which is HIPAA and GDPR compliant. So like literally, I can get you the recording, and it's actually compliant too. Like literally, it'll stream right down to your device. Is them saying the FBI told them there's nothing to investigate here. All the swatting, all the doxing, there's nothing to see here, which is still happening to this day. Like all the way up until last week when somebody said that I have mental issues and they need somebody to come to my house. So this is all Ken and other people and this guy Skyler. So
So it seems to me at this point that it's not only malicious harassment; it's a criminal conspiracy. He knows that this guy Skylar is a pedophile. He knows that he's involved in extortion schemes. Why is he working with him?
that's what we can't figure out. We've never been able to figure it out. One of the people that Ken gave information to is currently selling her body for meth in Germany. She also called the police, and the police shut that down. My district attorney failed to, they actually said they declined to prosecute. Anything that Skylar has, listen, Jonathan's cousin, this is even better. Joe Cat. I don't know if have you ever met, has Jonathan mentioned Joe Cat?
Yes, I've seen a video. I don't know him, but I've seen the video Jonathan did with him.
So they thought Joe was me because of the name Cat, because everybody knows nobody calls me Michael anymore. Like like if when somebody says Cat, I will turn my head. You say Michael, I'm like I don't even. Everybody knows me as Cat Hat. So I'll literally, like, I have a Cash App card. It's literally got a cat on it. So they thought I was Jonathan's cousin. This is where it actually gets interesting. Joe works with kids. Put the association together now.
Oh.
Yep. So yeah, they said he works with kids, he works with homeless, and they thought I was Joe Cat. So they started digging. So Ken, the master OSINT professional who claims that, hey, I stopped organized crime. He's never gotten a copy of my. So Skylar, a 23, for context to your viewers, Skylar, a 23-year-old bag boy, terminated. So he couldn't even bag groceries, like couldn't do paper or plastic. That's too hard. Somehow he was able to get my criminal record or former record, even though not criminal, but background, enough to edit it. Ken never got it. So he can't find it somehow. This kid can find it. Ken can't. They thought I was Joe Cat. So they started tying Joe Cat to the child abuse. They also contacted his college and tried to get him kicked out of school, which is the same thing they did with Jonathan.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Cat filed a police report with Dallas police mentioning Cthulhu Answers, Ken Weston, and Skylar Eggert, aka Dark Rabbit. Guess what? That investigation got shut down. Jonathan filed a police report with the Dallas police about that also. Police report got shut down. Another woman in Texas, Houston, Texas, I'm not going to name her, filed a report against Skylar and Cthulhu. Report got shut down. My report got shut down. Evan Lutz in Florida Cthulhu said that somebody in his Discord, you may have seen this, that he goes by the name Bowtied Cyber. Somebody in his Discord said, I wouldn't kick that woman out of bed. That was it. Ken, Cthulhu, said this guy is trying to rape people. Next thing you know, Evan, his mother got a text message saying they were going to cut her head off her body and lay it on her doorstep. This is what happens when Ken gets involved with things online. Then later, which I just saw, Jonathan sent it to me. Now they're saying that we take this stuff he does online too seriously. This is the newest thing that I just got of Ken saying, you guys just don't know how to take a joke. That's Ken's attitude about this whole thing. We don't know, you, me, Jonathan, Joe, Evan, we don't know how to take a joke.
Now, all of this is bad enough as is, but there is another sinister angle that I'd like to raise and get your opinion on. One of the things Tulsu was doing is obviously coordinating his campaigns with a whole host of other people. Some of them with well-known professionals in their own right who could have easily verified or failed to verify whatever he was doing. To me, it sounded less like the product of one low-skilled self-promoter and more like an organized, again, professional association driven by other people. Cthulhu was an attack dog for that group of people. He was not necessarily the mastermind of all of this. And quite frankly, I doubt someone like Tulhu slash Ken Weston would have knowledge of high level cybersecurity things, algorithms, Pegasus, or any of that stuff. I just don't think he understands what he got himself into.
I
But
agree.
other people did. And I saw him literally cross posting, coordinate. I saw timed tweets that appeared at the exact same time on multiple accounts, Cthulhu's and other people, including foreigners who are known for their foreign allegiances. I don't know if the name Marco Jones rings a bell.
I'd have to see, you'd have to show me a photo. Sometimes names don't mean anything. I'll never forget a face though. I'm one of those people, like if I see your face, I'm never going to forget that. Names will escape me. But like
Okay.
voices and faces, I will never forget. I had a customer a minute ago, right before I got off, right before this. Like, she's like, "Do you remember me?" I'm like, "I do, actually. I actually recognize your voice." So, no, you'd have to show me a picture of that another time. But
Hmm.
it does sound familiar. I agree with you. There's no way that Ken. I didn't think about that till just now, but there's no possible way in hell that Ken is a mastermind behind anything at all. It's
So that
impossible.
that makes him a member, a tool for other people with other agendas, which makes me wonder whether his association with Skylar and that prostitute in Germany and whoever else that he was involved with was not just, the paroxysms of a drug addict with extremely poor judgment, which may be part of the story, but it could be that maybe he was told to deal with those people. Maybe he was pushed to harass you and Jonathan became because you guys became a threat to much more powerful people who are not on drugs.
So that's something that's interesting. And I mentioned this to you at the beginning, and I'll say it since we're in, is that when I met with the FBI and they were accusing me of stealing their internal software, uh, like my coffee was ready and I forgot to get it, right? This is relevant. And I walk in, I'm like, "Hey, where's my coffee?" Because they had said, "Hey, where's your coffee?" I'm like, "I don't know, actually. I thought they were going to bring it out." But no, it was like a small little, it's really good too. It's overpriced, but amazing. And I came out. They were telling me, "Oh, you're like the real deal. You've studied things that are very much like what we studied at Quantico." And I'm like, "Yeah, I saved up 3 years, $5,000 to go study under Hadnagi and other people." But I said, let me ask you guys a question. Why are you so interested in this CART software? And this is a very big deal. That CART software, CART, that is internal forensic software. So I said, okay. They said, how did you get it on a disk? I go, an ISO. And I'm like, once again, I didn't steal your software. These kids did it. So that's a bigger question I'm gonna throw back at you, is that how did four kids get a copy of software that's actually supposed to be an image on a laptop? So this is remote desktop. I said, how does it work? Without obviously telling me how it works. They said when there's a crime, they'll bring a laptop out on the scene. That laptop has that software on it. Somebody was able to get that software and turn it into an image. So when you say there's bigger things at play, in that same conversation, they told me I needed to cut ties with Jonathan. And as I told you, I said, why?
Mhm.
Who is Jonathan Scott? And they said, we can't discuss that, but it's a conflict of interest to work with us and him. I said, what conflict of interest? Who does he work for? I said, does he work for NSO? And they said, they wouldn't, they were very good at not giving it up. And I said, my family's Israeli. I've had a cousin who's Mossad. I have a little brother who's DIA. My whole family has been in the intelligence community except for me. I said, who is Jonathan Scott? So that's a question I throw back to anybody, is that if Jonathan is a cyber criminal and wanted and selling illegal malware, why is Jonathan free? So listen, I'm not going to say how or why. I gave Jonathan information on something with Citizen Lab. I'd never heard of Citizen Lab before. I gave him something that had to do with one of their IPs of the addresses of where they were getting it from. That guy, Russian hackers cry. He seems insignificant, right? Eric Brogdon's company was selling DNS to Citizen Labs.
That explains a lot. Interestingly enough, a person with no technical skills, just as a disclaimer, I'm a lawyer, I'm an analyst, I'm not a technical person. In about 2 minutes, discovered that Eric's company had ties to Russians.
Citizen Labs, somebody contacted me and said, um, who's the guy that runs Citizen Labs? I always forget his name. This just shows you how these people are insignificant to me, really. But his wife. So Citizen Labs is part of what is it? Toronto University, right?
Yep. Hmm.
So that guy that runs it, somebody sent me some information, and her account got suspended very shortly after. I was told that the guy that heads Citizen Labs, his wife, has ties to Russia, that she was associated to Russia a long time ago before Citizen Labs. So,
Well, that answers a lot of question actually, because I did some OSINT research. By the way, not high level research. I was not scraping anything with specialized tools because I don't have them and I don't know how to use them. I just did reading of newspaper articles online, literally, and I discovered the following: Gebert, that's the name of the guy you're talking about. Prior to starting Citizen Lab, was an obscure 35-year-old researcher of political science, and his specialty was, electronic uh, drone surveillance, which has absolutely nothing to do with cybersecurity. The interesting thing is, as you know, academia is a cutthroat place, especially in the West. If you publish or perish, they say. I was not able to find any of Gebert's work online. Needless
but
to
what about
say,
his wife?
so
Have
I
you ever
didn't know
looked into her?
anything about that. But what I did know is that the Ford Foundation recruited this obscure guy with no background in cybersecurity, gave him had him as a fellow for 2 years, and then gave him money to start Citizen Lab, and I couldn't understand why. And now you just gave me the answer. How the hell did they identify this person out of all the political science academics in available to be recruited for such a thing? Now you have the answer, and of course that also explains how and why Snowden found Gilbert through their mutual friend, the founder of. I wrote an article about it, published it in Poland. It was taken down by the new government, which has also ties with all these people. But in it, I was basically looking into this whole scenario. I couldn't understand how it just didn't make sense how Gilbert and Snowden connected and why. And my theory was that that introduction was facilitated um by their mutual contacts, which was may have been true. But we also know who had why Gilbert was chosen for that role now.
I got a better one. So there's one person I've asked about Citizen Labs and their investment, right? They got a very weird donation from Apple. Right.
Mm-hmm.
What I've looked into that I did my own research on is that woman Samantha Voorhees or whatever. If you look at something, I actually asked Jonathan who she is. He said she's a friendly, and I said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Why?" I said, "Because I'm just stupid enough that I see the things that people don't." Turns out there's only one submission to Virus Total, one, her, and that was something Citizen Labs quoted. So outside of Citizen Labs and this one woman who I spoke with, who used to come into Twitter spaces, who says she's a friendly, she says she was hacked with Pegasus. She's the only submission to Virus Total. What these people fail to forget, the internet never forgets,
Mm-hmm.
right? Something Anonymous always says, the internet never forgets. While I'm a nobody, it's funny that I know all these people and I know all the old school hackers like Legion of Doom and MOD, Masters of Destruction. I know I've been around a long time. I was a phone freaker. So the things that I will admit to, I've already have, and of course in a 7-page confessional. And I used to do things on the phone line that you would get arrested for now. That's how I know a lot of these people. I've been on the scene. I just don't go to DEF CON because I don't like these people. They're assholes. But Samantha's the only person that's ever submitted anything to Virus Total. Something I actually said to Jonathan. Everybody says Jonathan used the software wrong. Okay, let's say Jonathan used the software wrong. I challenge anybody that's watching this, that watches this, show me any virus that only one company has the indicators of compromise for. Just one. There's only one group of people on Earth that have samples or are able to identify Pegasus. How? Jonathan brought up something that's why I believe in Jonathan. According to the timeline, it would be impossible for Citizen Labs to have a copy of Pegasus because in order for them to get an indicator of compromise, they would have to have what? A live sample. Where did they get it from? Pegasus is designed that once it goes out on the internet, it deletes all traces of itself. Okay, maybe they got a compromise there. Well, then it doesn't match up with the timeline of when they made it better. So listen, you say what you want about NSO, but their product is so good, the US government bought a copy. Was reported by Leo Laporte and the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. The federal government FBI bought a copy of Pegasus for $5 million. This is not a secret. So while Ken is out there calling everybody repressive regimes, why does the FBI have a copy of Pegasus? Also, why did the FBI even buy a copy of Pegasus? We don't use spyware on this country, right? And why did the FBI do it? Where is it? There's rumors out there that politicians were hacked in this country. This is all public. This is all stuff that people that just took a couple minutes. They spend all this time on Twitter doing this, but they can't go online and look at Leo Laporte, who used to be on Tech TV G4, one of the most, and Gibson Research, another one. Gibson Research. Forgot what his first name is. But Gibson Research, one of the most accredited people on earth, have reported that the federal government, U.S. government, bought a copy of Pegasus to dismember it. Where's their submissions to Virus Total? How did they get a copy of Pegasus? See, the thing is, if it got me thinking, if they have a copy of it, it would need to permanently be without the internet. In other words, they'd have to have it sandboxed in order to work with it. Also, it means I brought this up to Jonathan. It means they stole intellectual property also. So there's a lot of things here that are pure speculatory. But if Citizen Labs has a copy of Pegasus, they legally stole it. It's a copyrighted piece of, or it's patented. They can't own it. They can't keep it. They can't just dismember it. It's against the agreement. It's reverse engineering protected IP. This would be the largest IP lawsuit. And that's what got me really thinking is that Ken and them said, what does Citizen Labs have to gain out of this? I said, you're looking at it from the wrong lens. I'm retarded. I'm looking at it from the right lens. You know what they have to lose? Fabricating evidence, having to
Yeah.
give back millions of dollars of research money. Same thing with Amnesty. When people said to me, do you really think Amnesty would fabricate? I'm like, this is not about fabricating. You don't seem to understand something. What do they have to lose if they're wrong? Everything.
Mm-hmm.
I went and ran the numbers. What is Amnesty International worth? Billions. What's Citizen Labs worth? They're a public university with they won't give up their why won't they give up their funding at all? These are the things that people need to ask themselves. It's not the things that are obvious. If you read intelligence community training, how they look at things, the analysts, the stuff that I'm training my models to do, they don't look for the things that you see. They look for anomalies. And when you're looking at, even as a reporter, when you're looking at like, what doesn't, like if you go, whoa, all these things line up, reverse the lens. Which of these things doesn't belong? And it's what you just said. What doesn't make sense is how are all these top cybersecurity people? Ken, Good Morning America, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, Wired Magazine. Where's his work? What does he do at these conventions? He gives out stickers, buttons, and t-shirts about Jonathan Scott being a fraud. So when I'm going to ask again, who is Jonathan Scott? What does Jonathan do? And why is the FBI scared of him and why is he not in jail? Isn't that funny?
You know, one of the possibilities is exactly what you said. They somehow obtained this technology, but the thing is, if they did have it, they would have been able to create a much more convincing argument for their shoddy propaganda. I don't believe that they have it, although that is certainly a very interesting possibility. One of the things that I found, I looked back on again, reading old articles that nobody cares anymore, the OSINT research, if only anyone actually did it with all the fancy technology, nobody brought up this article. Washington Post, Nothing Secret, 2016. Bill Marchuk, who is one of the fellows with Citizen Lab, breaks the news about the new software called Pegasus, by then 1 year in existence, that is allegedly being used to target all these people. Bill Marchuk, at that point in time, is a PhD student and a complete nobody. If you look at his bio, especially at this time, he does not have the skills to make such determinations.
They won't
So,
let anybody come in and analyze it. Why?
because there's nothing to analyze.
Right.
But the point about Bill Marchuk is how would he come up with this information, being a nobody with no skills to examine phones, if an intelligence agency alerted him to the fact of the software being in existence. Now, if you look at Bill Marchuk's background, where was he at around the same time before he was doing PhD? He was working for an NGO think tank called Bahrain Watch with a guy named Mark Owen Jones, the same guy I mentioned earlier, an associate of Tulhu. Bahrain Watch was founded by an Iranian-backed Bahrain oppositioner, basically a Bahraini version of Hezbollah, similar to them. They coordinate with Hezbollah a lot. Extremists, welcome in Iran. This is who gave the money for that group. Marco Jones, by the way, was raised in Bahrain. His parents were oil. His family was oil people. He studied in Bahrain, got somehow involved with the opposition there, and after leaving to get his education in the UK, went on to do this sort of activity with Bill Marchuk, who then went on to join Citizen Lab. So where would Bill get his information from? Probably from an intelligence agency, Qatari or Iranian or Russian.
See, when you start piecing all that together, like it's something that my own family said, "Who am I?" And why would somebody as prominent as Ken mess with me? When somebody asks these questions, I've taken journalism for I'm a communication major. That's actually my background, communication and organizational communication and leadership. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to ask you the same question. Why is somebody of this stature messing with me? And if Jonathan is a nobody, why are they messing with him? If Jonathan has nothing, right? Why do they care so much? Because in my opinion, he doesn't have nothing. Jonathan uncovered something that is that big that it's easier. Like, listen, it's no secret. And even Jack Riesweiler, right? Why was Jack Riesweiler coming after Jonathan? Because Jonathan was poking holes in a lot of the shit that he was saying. Where is the research to show that Citizen Labs has what they say they have? Why won't they let a third party listen? One thing that Jonathan was doing right, not one thing, is going at it from an academic standpoint.
Mhm.
Jonathan posts a paper and gets it published as part of his PhD. It's no longer refutable, is it? It's now been peer reviewed. It wouldn't matter what Ken and all them say, but where's the scientific research? I've looked at the white papers from Citizen Lab. They're not white papers. They're not science, and they're not reproducible. We work with the scientific method, something that I had Jonathan right before he got off Twitter willingly. He said they're not working with the scientific method. You either use induction, deduction, or abduction. Those are the three forms of what we call cognitive ways of looking at something. This has been recognized in artificial intelligence, machine learning, all the intelligence communities. There's one more method that they use, and I have papers. I've got a hard drive full of documentation from CIA, FBI, former analysts. It's all I study. The scientific method is the other thing that they apply to figuring out how things work. Abduction, deduction, induction, and scientific method. Nothing that these guys have produced is reproducible by anybody else but them. Who else has researched Pegasus except for Citizen Lab?
They became the experts, the only experts on this issue. But the funny thing is, long before I met Jonathan, I was taking a look at their report about one of the alleged Pegasus operations, and me, a person with no technical training whatsoever, realized that it's complete garbage. That's me, just a regular person. So imagine all these people out there reading these reports. This is the emperor is naked scenario, and claiming that it's credible only because the Citizen Lab positioned itself as the big name in digital rights. And if you look at the 99% of their work, it concerns Pegasus and related matters.
And yeah, and disinformation campaigns, right? This was
Well, the
something.
Pegasus thing, the Pegasus project is the biggest disinformation campaign. It's the most sophisticated disinformation campaign. I've written papers on that, comparing it. This is what one of my personal specialties is: information warfare. I've compared it to I've looked at it, and I looked at the methods used by the former Soviet Union in creating these massive campaigns, and I've done also academic papers on all of this, from a communications perspective, from a intelligence perspective, not obviously a technical perspective. But to me, the pattern is so obvious that any person with even a slight background in this area should be able to see how and it's done and by whom. They have a huge network. They have all the consortium of international journalists. They have all these media publications. Sure, they have a lot of people, and some of them are paid hacks, and some of them are just not technically savvy enough, and some of them, given to peer pressure. But surely, out of all the people out there should be more people questioning the findings of why there's a group of ideologically similar organizations kind of pushing this one thing and one thing only in a particular way, not releasing any technical information, not being remotely transparent, and who benefits from this. This is the basic question people nobody asks, not the politicians complaining about all of this. Who benefits? Who benefits from Pegasus being off the market?
That's the question I keep asking. There's also another thing on that one also, which is one, we know that they do disinformation campaigns, but this was something that happened. There was a lot that, in hindsight, when I think about that meeting with the agents, right? I think we were there like an hour or two, and they said, like, you have to cut ties with Jonathan. I said my family's Israeli and I've got a SAM ID, meaning that the federal government, in order to do business with the government and get DoD to be able to pitch to the Department of Defense, I was using PTAC, is through a university here, through the University of Tennessee, actually, which Jonathan went to, actually, and University of they work with universities, but they to fund it, and he said, like, well, you got to cut ties with Jonathan. And I'm like, so he works for NSO. Well, no, we're not saying that. And, and I'm like, this is about Pegasus. which once again, remember, I could have given them the guy that claims to have actual Pegasus samples. And if Intel broker says he has something, as we've seen, he has something. That's the Colonial Pipeline guy, Comcast. That's the guy that hacked the healthcare portal. What was interesting though is I said, well, let's say Jonathan works for NSO. This was a question I posed to the analyst and the agent, because at that point I'm talking to the analyst, Tom, not the agent. Right? Clay is a fucking idiot. So that being said, I said, well, let me ask you something. If it's a conflict of interest and my family's Israeli, my father was a Sabra, then that means, well, I said, there are allies, right? And they said, it's a conflict of interest. And I said, but there are allies, right? Don't forget that around that time, the Discord leak, the kid that was leaking things on Discord, do you remember that one? Did
Mm-hmm.
you ever see that
Sure.
leak? Did you ever see the leak though? What was in it? You
Not
never saw the leak itself. In
no.
that leak, which was in the news, like all the stuff leaks eventually. In it was information that the Israeli government was going to move, and the U.S. government was not happy about it. That the war on Ukraine and some attacks in the Middle East, without the U.S. government's blessing, Israel got sick of waiting, and they were going to proceed. And what's funny is this guy, Andrew Bustamante. You can't get away from Andrew Bustamante. That's the CIA spy. He's selling courses. I bought his course actually. It's good stuff. Andrew Bustamante said something on Lex Friedman. These are what I mean about I'm so stupid that I see these things. So the FBI says I can't work with Jonathan. Everybody says Jonathan works for NSO. NSO is in Israel. Israel documents leak saying that they're doing things without the US government's blessings. Very recently, you'll remember what's been in the news again, Stuxnet. I haven't heard the name Stuxnet in years. All of a sudden, Stuxnet's back in the news. This is Michael's radar going, why are we talking about Stuxnet? Stuxnet became Flame. Stuxnet was never supposed to get out on the internet. It was only supposed to stay in an Iranian nuclear facility when they flicked the most clever thing ever, right? Flicking the centrifuge on and off, on and off, on and off. That's how Stuxnet worked till the centrifuge went off cycle and broke. The reason why I'm bringing this up is if there are allies, why are they saying that I can't talk to somebody who potentially works for their government? There are allies, right? They didn't like that. I'm not kidding. That there was something about that meeting that really pissed them off, and it was me swearing my allegiance to Jonathan. I refuse to cut ties with Jonathan. Listen, Jonathan doesn't pay me. He doesn't give me anything. There's times when I didn't think he could help me more, but I'm going to ask again: is who is Jonathan Scott? His whole life was scrubbed prior to like 2020. All they have is a previous court case where they says he tried to sue a former employee, which is his cousin or something. But what else do we know about him? Nothing. So that being said, if Jonathan was some major spy, why is he not being arrested? And why I bring up Bustamante and where it's relevant, in Lex Friedman asked him flat out, you were a CIA analyst, deep cover. What country scares you the most of all the countries? What country do you think Andrew Bustamante mentioned? Of
Israel?
the Mossad, right? Because he said that the US government will leave people behind. This is in a Lex Friedman interview. You can go watch it. He said the US government will leave somebody to rot for life. We had that guy in Russia that his family claims he was a salesman. Russia claims that he's a spy. We traded that basketball player for the Lord of War. But what's the one country that Andrew Bustamante said the Israeli Mossad scares him more than any other organization? Lex said why. His exact response is they'll kill everybody to get back one citizen. So when you ask something like it's something to just sit, I'm not rambling either. It's something that people need to think about is what is the US government so scared of? If they have Pegasus, they're our allies. They wouldn't use Pegasus on us, right? It's a question I just have never gotten an answer to. Ever, 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 ever.
Yeah,
Jonathan
what
is apparently some wanted criminal, but nobody can arrest him. He's in Dallas, Texas, everybody. Go arrest him. He just sent me a photo. He's looking buff. He's working out and stuff 6 days a week. So a wanted criminal selling malware and lying about citizen labs, but nobody's
happened?
questioning the science itself. So to answer your question on that, what are these cyber people doing? what is actually going on with these people that were nobodies that are all of a sudden somebodies? Like you said, Ken Weston, where's his stuff? Where's the technology that he made that he had enough to start a company, but now he's going around working for other companies? If he put organized criminals in jail, why is Ken working for somebody else now? They claim he has 15 years experience as a CISO. Where? What about Eric Brogdon? Eric Brogdon is a salesman for a company that sells DNS. He lives in a shitty, like he thinks this guy lives in a $300,000 house in California. That's poor. So I live in Tennessee. You have a $300,000 house here, you're rich. If you have a $300,000 house in California, you're practically in Skid Row. Who are these people? Why are they relevant? And why do they want to shut somebody like me down? Like my family said, and like I said numerous times while I'm reading that letter, I'm a nobody. I'm only the guy that took down a pedophile ring, had the contents of Zacon RU, which you can go and look up Zacon. Half the lawyers are dead now. Who am I? Why is Ken Weston and top cybersecurity professionals trying to shut me up too? And the misinformation campaign, we all know, or not, maybe not all, but we all know that the way that they don't kill people, they turn you into a psychopath, right?
Exactly, exactly. They try to shut you up, discredit you, character assassinate you, and this is a traditional Soviet method. If that doesn't work, then they eventually go after you, with the law enforcement, with, criminal complaints, with all these things. Then they start fabricating evidence, and if none of that works as well, then, you may suffer an unfortunate accident if you're not careful.
Yep. And that's something that, you know, I'm not going to lie too. Like that's something else too. Jonathan talking about leaving the country. All of a sudden now he's fleeing. Allegedly I'm on the run. So yeah, I'm on the run in my room with a hot cup of coffee somehow, but I'm on the run. I mean, everything. I actually I posted this the other day because I thought it was funny, but I'll share this with you. So these are the things I've been accused of. I finally made a list: international arms dealer, human trafficking, drugs. I work for the Israeli government. I'm rapist, murderer. I do spyware, hacking. I'm the head of Lockbit. Just so in case you were wondering, former CIA, former FBI, former cop, terminated from all three of those jobs for raping suspects or witnesses. I'm unemployed. I've never owned a company. Was never registered with the DOD. I'm a stalker, a felon. I'm on the run. This was a weird one, but it's true. I'm a virgin, apparently, even though I was a victim of domestic violence. I'm a domestic assailant. And last but not least, I'm in a satanic cult.
You know, the
So I,
The funny thing about all of these things is how much they resemble typical claims from Russian propaganda, first of all. And second of all, some of these are outright projections from some of these people.
so that's something
Also,
also. Go
typical of
ahead.
the Russian propaganda. They often project the very things that they themselves are doing. This is like literally typical.
That's the thing that I wanted to mention is that so in studying Kubark and some of these techniques, I met Robin Dreeke, former FBI. He worked under Joe Navarro, who was the #1 profiler for body behavior. Robin invented the building rapport technique. He actually sells it, and him and I have had talks about how building rapport is stupid, and I have a technique that is way better. But I asked him where he got his start. He used to turn Russian assets back in the 80s. That's where he developed his building rapport techniques. And I
Mhm.
always bring up the fact that they use a framework called mice to rascals. I knew a black ops guy, and when people are like, how do you know he was black ops? I'm like, where do you get mice to rascals from? Like some guy contacts me out of the blue and starts giving me CIA level interrogation techniques, which I've studied. Mice to rascals is the framework that was developed by the same guy that how to influence people. Uh, oh my God, I don't know why his name is escaping me right now, but he's the father of torture. And in there, I talked to Robin about, the Russians always were able to turn our people, but we weren't able to turn their people the same with the same skill. So I said, how good is your technique? When you actually look, the Russians have this weird thing where they'll just sit there and listen very quietly. They're very patient. For a group of people who are also not patient, they don't put up with a lot of bullshit. Like, if you talk too much, they don't like it. I've learned. Don't talk a lot around Russian people, and they don't have a good sense of humor. That being said, they listen. And that's something that I learned their intelligence community does very well, is listen. Listen very well while you spill your guts out. So yeah, it's very much the Russian propaganda, and I would love to know who's behind all of this. But when you sit and really dig, I think it's the federal government. I'll never be able to prove. I've reached out to Senator Marsha Blackburn, Senator or Congressman Tim Burchett, Senator Becky Massey, and all kinds of people who claim to be prosecuting Chris Wray and Mayorka. They say that they want to stomp out FBI corruption. Where's the Hunter Biden laptop, right? That was allegedly, it wasn't real. Now all of a sudden it's real. Now all of a sudden it's fake. All of a sudden the Secret Service lost it. One of the most important pieces of evidence in U.S. history, it got lost. The Richard Nixon tapes they had, the evidence against Trump they had, a laptop that has pictures of Hunter Biden sleeping with underage girls, doing crack, and gun possession is missing.
Well,
So
more
when
importantly than crack and gun possession, to be honest, that's not even, are his interactions with foreign people. And actually, this I don't ascribe to any sort of conspiracy. This I see a pattern of complete and gross incompetence from our Congress, which we have seen from the Benghazi hearings onward and so forth, and in practically every area. So do I believe there is corruption within intelligence agencies and the federal government? Absolutely. Do I believe some people benefit from dealing with foreign actors, not dealing with their own allies, going after particular people for particular things, not having their own stuff exposed? Without a doubt. Do I think it's a gigantic conspiracy? No, it's just too many incompetent people. All of that would have been spilled a long time ago if there was any sort of, So, do I believe the federal government is behind this? No, but I do believe there are compromised people within the federal government who very much benefit from this turn of events.
I should have said that too, because Jonathan gets me on it all the time. He's like, there's good agents out there. I'm like, yep, you're right, Jonathan. But for every bad one out there that has like an informant breaking the law and doxing children and extorting minors, those bad ones, it's a chain, right? They're not somebody.
Well, I'll tell you why it looks like that. It looks like that because corrupt people bring in, either stupid people or other corrupt people because they don't want the good people to, uncover their, little corrupt sidekicks or God forbid, jump them career-wise. So that's why we keep seeing the proliferation of idiots. But so there is a pattern to that, but it's not because of, some master plan.
Right, it's
Quite
not
the
a deep
opposite.
state. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to be quoted as it. It's not a deep state thing,
It's a
but
very shallow state. It's actually.
correct. It's very, and Andrew Bustamante actually talked about that recently, and I'm like, no, he's right. Like, you get caught up in it. So even myself, like, I'm like, I know that there's not some deep state, but it's funny that I can't get around an agent. This guy, like, he's not some like, and Jonathan knows this guy. That's what's even funnier. The agent who's shut down these operations or the investigations, Jonathan knows him. He tried to say he doesn't know him. I'm like, you're from Texas, right? The agent was like, how do you know that? I'm like, Jonathan knows you. And I'm not kidding. This guy got very freaked out. Jonathan Scott knows the FBI agent who shut down all these local police investigations.
Look, there's
Is
without a question compromised people. That's the scary part.
right.
I would
So
actually
I agree with
almost
you.
see the level of evil genius that would at least be competent. But instead, we're seeing, greedy, corrupt individuals prone to manipulation and prone to be obsessed with their own careers and pleasing whoever and, pursuing, narrow political agendas. That's I think is a much more likely story. And it's very unfortunate when such people get control of one area. I mean, look at Charles McGonagall in New York. You know, this guy shut down so many things just by being in the position that he was. He was a corrupt guy working most likely for, for foreign intelligence, and once he got nabbed, people around him were trying to cover it all up to protect their own interests. That's all there is. It's always all there is.
How
What
do we get
happened?
around it? That's a question I have for you and anybody else, is that even if I submit and say you're right, because you are, it's insane that even a and listen, this guy Clay Anderson, he's not some small time, like he's not some, almost like, I'm not saying he's like high level, but he's not some guy that just appeared out of nowhere also. He's been in the cyber industry for I think 15, 20 years. He actually used to work on like kidnapping cases. He told me, I was like, "Give me your background." He says he used to work on extortion and blackmail and
Yeah.
cases like that. So his experience in cyber is deep.
So you're saying that somebody like that believed the 23-year-old extortionist and pedophile?
You heard the audio. You've heard the audio. That's real.
So that
Anywhere that he finds that audio, he gets it pulled. Not the agent, Skyler. And he's the one that leaked it. It's funny that what he doesn't realize, I'll say this publicly. I'm going to post it back on YouTube. Do you know why? See, he's claiming he's not Dark Rabbit. But in order for him to actually get the audio taken down, because of YouTube's stupid copyright strike, he's going to have to give up his identity. So I'm posting it back on YouTube on a brand new account that I don't care about, so that he can copyright strike it. So that now I can say, oh, well, I'm going to need the identity of that person who's claiming it's copyright, and we're going to get his name on file also as Skylar James Eggert. So yeah, I don't know. That's the funny thing, is that Agent Clay Anderson is a big deal in some aspect. But yeah, I told you, Skylar was vetted. If you listen to that audio, it blew my mind to know that Skylar had been already working with the FBI for 2 years. What you don't know is Skylar was actually arrested. He's a low-life scammer. He got caught. He's the only one that got caught. He was part of a ring of scammers. He's the only kid that got caught. So he's been on retribution for 4 years, wanting to get payback. And what he does is he piggybacks. So Jonathan's a big deal. He figures, I can piggyback off Jonathan's career and become a somebody. Where they messed up is me. I'm being honest with you. Where all of these guys messed up was me, a nobody. Just a guy that had slowly started feeding the FBI some information, started getting closer to people in the underground. And eventually, I don't care, I'll say it publicly, they fucked up. They could have had Intel Broker, one of the number one guys. Like, if you think Lockbit's wanted, great. Everybody wants Lockbit. They want the head of Lockbit, which apparently, right, they arrested him. Or did they? The only other problem is, well, then, how are they going to get Intel Broker now? So, to that question, also, these guys messed up. And that's something that I think they're realizing. So I'm not saying it's part of a mass cover up, but even Jonathan is now being like, they fucked up. I'm a nobody. If you mess with somebody who's popular and big, yeah, you can discredit them. You can do all kinds of things. But when you get a nobody like me, they turned me into a somebody by messing with me. So that's the only thing I can say. I mean, think about it though, right? They didn't realize that I've got like 20 gigs of data that I've been collecting for 10 years on multiple cyber criminal groups. It's all gone now. I had data on pedophile rings. When all this had started, I got so freaked out, I encrypted the drives, I forgot the passwords. So
no.
ultimately, yeah, I did. I had to delete it. And the other thing was, there was no CP or anything in there, but there were literal names of people that were heads of trafficking rings gone.
Do you think
Stuff
you
that
can
was handed to me by
recover the
it's
passwords with hypnotherapy?
I deleted it. I sanitized the drives after also.
Oh,
I don't keep anything locally on my hard drive. And the FBI knows it too. I'm like, if you kicked in my door right now, you'd find nothing. There's nothing on my local drives. Everything's been encrypted and scattered. And then what I normally, and I've told people this process, I'll take a drive, encrypt it, then take it and zip it and break it into archives. You need all of those archives in one folder to reinflate the file. So I'll give you a file. I'll give somebody else a file. And then I forget who I give the files to. I'll also email out files and I'll hide like steganography. So the drives that actually had the information on Docspin, the one that got all of this started, and I'll send you an email where this is a fun fact. The federal government, the FBI, allows Docspin to operate. And when you want, like, if you say he doesn't have the proof, I've shown you things already.
Mm-hmm.
There's an email from Clay Anderson that says, "Do you have information about this criminal?" And I said, "No." Why? He says, "Is it on Docspin?" Why is a federal agent me asking me if an information about somebody's on Docspin? If the shit that's on there is illegal and they're doxing people and they're extorting minors. That's when I learned that Jonathan said, "Welcome to the game." They allow this stuff to happen. This isn't a deep state conspiracy, but it's like people like Skylar, like Ken, they're useful idiots, is what we call them. They're puppets.
Exactly. And this
They're
is
not
the
big. They're just idiots at the end of the day, because you think they're going to defend Ken if all the chips fall? Like, guaranteed they didn't realize that ultimately I have no criminal background that could be verified in a court of law, right?
Ken unfortunately had the impact of having all this valuable information deleted. So all these geniuses who believe that they are the biggest things in cybersecurity, ironically, they actually ended up destroying cybersecurity efforts with their stupid games. But who ultimately benefits from all that? The guys behind all of this who are masterminding, so they
I,
know how to use these guys, and and watching these operations they know how to manipulate these systemic vulnerabilities that we have, that incompetence, that very standard thinking, in the box thinking, these procedural, these procedural tropes and cliches. They know how to play the game. They're playing us. They're observing us from an outside. They're watching our vulnerabilities, and they are hacking the system. Not that there's much to hack, to be honest.
and I'll tell
Like,
you this, and I mean this, like, I had somebody ask me, "Do I feel bad deleting evidence?" I'm like, "Well, technically, it's not evidence. The FBI didn't want it. So if you don't want it, it's not evidence." I will tell this to anybody. Dealing with the FBI is a pain in the ass. They think that I'm a pain in the ass. They're a pain in the ass. You have to upload things, they have procedures, there's chains of custody that need to be maintained, but just dealing with them. You if you had the head of Conti ransomware group, historically speaking, other than Lockbit, they ransomed a country. They're the only group in the history of mankind to do what they did, right? When the Conti docs released, everybody else is looking at how to reverse engineer shell and do all this. I analyzed, this is when ChatGPT first came out. I took all the management documents, I ran them through ChatGPT, early ChatGPT, and ran a psych profile on the head of Conti. Ended up meeting the head of Conti in VX Underground chat. When I said, "This guy posts a message," he said, "This is my new car, ransomware bought it." What I recognized, because again, I'm a nobody, I'm stupid. I noticed the trees were the same, the tree line. What I didn't know is that Russia has palm trees. I thought it was somewhere here in the States or a tropical island. I said, "That video looks just like one that somebody posted on Twitter a year ago." I said, "Hey, Conti Daddy, how are you doing?" And everybody said, "I'm an idiot. That's not Conti." And he said, "I'm doing well." His name is Alexei. But think about this too. For anybody that says, "Why wouldn't I just hand that over to the feds?" Why would I? Because you know what? The feds, they lie. I deserve, like, if Ken is making all this money traveling around the country, and I mean this, like, I don't want to sound shallow, but don't I deserve to get paid for the time, internet, and energy that I put into my research also? I
mm-hmm.
mean, I read it to you from my own words, is that, so yes, I did delete a lot of stuff. I deleted shit tons of evidence on Karakurt. I deleted evidence on Lockbit. I deleted evidence on Conti. I deleted evidence that would have brought pedophiles to justice. Why? Because the FBI was incompetent also. The agents that I were dealing with, I handed them the group of kids who hacked them. What did they do with it? Nothing. And I don't I hope you don't think less of me of that, but if everybody else deserves to get paid, I'm filing bankruptcy soon. These people have hurt my career. They've literally made it to where nobody will hire me. So shouldn't I get paid for my time and money also? So yeah, half
Well, I
that
actually
evidence that
agree
I
with that.
collected is gone.
I actually agree with that completely. I think you should, but I think that if you delete information as opposed to just not give it, I mean, then you'll miss out on opportunities. If that's the big problem with that. I'm
Yep.
not saying you should give information if you're not getting out of it, anything out of it, but you should keep it for your own benefit. However, this brings me to the final point in all of this. Well, not that it's final, the conversation is clearly not over, but um, wrapping up the story about Ken Weston and his crew, it seems to me that going forward, it's not enough to simply hold these people legally accountable for their assorted um damages. I think it's important to get infor information about them and figure out the big picture. What is going on? Who was behind them? Who was masterminding these campaigns? Why were they able to get away with so much garbage for all these years if they didn't have some sort of a protection? If this racket isn't much bigger than two low-level incompetents? Who
That's a question.
benefits?
Yeah. Who?
And
That's a
these,
question. Yeah.
in their own capacity, they are nobodies. But as pegs in a much bigger mechanism, they have, I think, an important story to share, and I think it's important to try to get it out of them.
I could. That's it. And I know what you meant wrapping up the interview. That's a question I asked Jonathan recently. What, like all of this, when all is said and done, I mean, it's quite clear Ken is nuts. Like they keep saying I have crazy. I don't have any mental issues. But that being said, what is the end goal of all of this? If it was to get Pegasus, I could have given them a kid that had copies of Pegasus. Cool. It's not about Pegasus. Okay, cybersecurity. It's not about cybersecurity. What's the end goal of all of this? So it's a very important question: is who benefits out of all this? They don't give a shit. Like, we know the FBI doesn't really care about kids. If they did, they could put a stop to it. I handed them a guy that was filming himself laughing while kids are screaming in the background saying, I'm going to kill myself. That was handed off to Counterterrorism North Carolina. What's the end goal here? You got all these. It reminds me of something I just posted about with a company that I'm auditing. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. That's
Mhm.
why I know it's not some deep state conspiracy shit. But in my head, I just think it's people covering their asses for poor behavior. And then people like Skylar, Eric Brogdon, Ken, at the end of the day, they'll fall eventually. But what scares me is the people that are ultimately behind it. What's the goal? What is the end goal? If NSO is the enemy, which they're not, what is the goal still? They're legally selling malware that literally the US government purchased. They're one of the customers. So they're not the enemy. So I don't know. You got my head spinning on that one. Is what's the end goal? How many lives are going to, your life, my life, Jonathan, the dozens of other people that Ken has destroyed? Who benefits out of all this at the end of the day? That's a solid question that I would put up to anybody. And if nobody's sitting there thinking about that, then I don't know what to tell you. Is that ultimately it's not about Donald Trump but like, what is the end goal here? Because ultimately nobody sits there and goes, you know what, I support oppressive regimes and putting malware on reporters' phones and watching them get chopped up into a little suitcase. I've never heard anybody be like, I support that. I definitely don't. So that's the question I want to know. And we're never going to know. Look, I'm going to die not knowing who was behind all this. I may get like appearances out of this. I may be able to write a story. But you know what I'm never going to know? And that does bother me, is that why the fuck did somebody push me to the point of wanting to kill myself for this? What's the bigger play here? Right?
Well, I think some of it is something that we can discuss afterwards, but I think this general question I think should stay, and I think we should keep it in mind as we move forward because it would be such a shame after everything you've been through, Jonathan has been through, all the other people that they put in through, that if it all just ended with Ken, getting cut loose from the FBI and being forgotten. I think there's much more to the story, and I think that story needs to be heard.
I agree. Thank you for having me.
Thank you
Honestly,
so
like
much. Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch because there is a lot more to talk about off stage.
yeah, hey, I'll say this on a recording too. I will send you a private secure messaging thing that's way more secure than Signal also. That's
Please
something that
do.
like it's it scares the intelligence community also. Like I'll say this to your audience as a final thing. Yeah, when you hang out with cyber criminals and they actually trust you, they give you tips on things that keep you safe also. You know, like splitting archives out and sending it out to multiple people around the world. So, yeah, I appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to being in touch.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Bye.